Hi, this is Samantha Tonge, Labrakeeter Marketing again. I am here with Derek Watson. It's another one of my interviews where we talk about marketing, a specific area of marketing or something related to marketing. And I'm going to be speaking to Derek about, making your complex simple, which is my tagline. So basically talking about, specifically in this situation, design and how you use that to put complex messages across in a simple way, I guess. So Derek, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Derek Watson. I started working on my own 3 years ago as Canal Path Creative, following numerous companies and from either working for other people or setting up on my own, and just being more control and doing everything myself.
Yeah, it's so liberating, isn't it, going out on your own?
Yeah, it's scary because you have to do everything from, you have to go out and find the work. Luckily, virtually all my work comes to me, but you still have to do all the networking.
Yes. Yes.
Which is fun the majority of the time. I think everybody, rather than being really serious and business focused, that there's a lot of sort of social aspect, especially over the last year.
Yeah,
it's been good.
Yeah. So anyone who's maybe watching in the future, we're just kind of coming towards hopefully the end of the pandemic. Everything crossed. Like me, you've got quite a lot of clients, work with quite a few clients who have quite a complex message, don't you?
Yes, that's right. Especially from my previous company, most of the work we did was with IT companies, software companies. So a lot of the work we did was around IT service management, change management, etc. And so quite complex processes, etc. to get across to staff, especially those that are in the organisation who don't work in IT and don't know all the vocabulary.
Yes. I think a lot of industries are quite guilty of using their own terminology rather than the customer terminology, and I'm guessing that's you find the same.
Yes, it's even saying that you can't use these acronyms all the time. You have to explain because the people in accounts will have no idea what you're talking about. People in marketing will have no idea what you're talking about. And just getting, quite often the IT departments are seen as almost a separate company, and it's getting the connection between IT and, in those cases, IT and the rest of the business. Yeah.
And even if your target market is that bit more technical, even if you're aiming at the IT professionals, you still need to get their attention and get that message across very quickly.
Yes, that's true. Just getting the right amount of details quite critical, and you must find that as well with your writing. Just you can't be too simplified, but then it's just that balance between being too simplified and getting into too much detail.
Yeah, and it's the right level of detail at the right stage in the buyer journey.
Yeah.
I've worked with quite a few clients who want to give all the information at once, anything they might need, at the very first point of contact.
I was at a conference called BizThink in San Francisco a number of years ago, and one of the speakers said that one of the big things that infographics in particular has to get over is the aspect, and he called it map shock, where you try and get too much information to the end user at too early a stage. They just look at it and just get confused and switch off.
Yeah, so infographics, if you don't know what an infographic is, it's basically a way to get across, through design, get across the most important information that a potential buyer might need. But there are good infographics and bad infographics. I've definitely seen both. So how do you go about using design to, I guess, including infographics to get across these more complex messages?
Well, you have to work quite closely with the client or copywriter, just to work out what's really important, what needs to get across, and if there's a process or a journey involved, and just map that out and work it out as clearly as possible to get just the right amount of information across to the right people. Yeah, I know what you mean about infographics. You do get infographics where it's just a page full of figures and some little diagrams in it, and that's not really an infographic. Because a true infographic, you should be able to take away the majority of the words, and it should still be reasonably understood.
Yeah, I saw the other day, I was literally a couple of days ago, I was looking at from a big IT company as well, not one of my clients, an infographic, and it was just a bunch of text, a load of paragraphs with a little picture next to it, and they called it an infographic.
That's a table, probably.
But yeah, yeah, like I say, good infographics and bad infographics out there. So I guess from your point of view, you think that the less is best?
Well, it depends what you're getting across. And as I said, it's critical you work with the copywriter and the client, so you're getting that right amount of detail, because as I say, you don't want to get too much information on. Quite often you can do things, if you can do things interactively, then you can give a more basic high level view, and then you can make it clickable or put rollovers in and provide extra detail that way. That's quite an effective way to do it if you can.
Yeah, is that generally web-based?
Web-based, or it's HTML-based, or PDF. PDF's quite a good way of doing it as well.
Interactive PDFs, right?
It's a bit more clunky than HTML. HTML is a smoother experience, but it can be a bit more clunky. But still very usable, and we've done that frequently over the years.
And I guess that helps. You're using design there to guide that customer through the journey and find the information that's relevant to them.
Yes, indeed, and you can map it out as a journey, or it's just basically trying to pull as much information and make sense without using iconography. Most of the time it's using a graphic or an illustration, and just trying to use imagery that the end user is going to understand.
Yes. Yeah. So a lot of this is resonating with me, because it's very similar from a copywriting point of view. Yeah, and so do you I guess when you're working with a client, working out the process, you'll have different ideas about how much information should be there depending on what it is you're doing. So if you're doing an infographic that's just for social media, that's going to be very different from like the interactive PDF that you're talking about, I'm guessing.
Yes, definitely. And for social media, you just want to get it must be much I can't even speak, much punchier, and to get message across quickly and simply. And it might be for likes of social media, you don't want to do one larger graphic. You may want to do a series and break it into a series, or
the carousel.
Yeah, indeed.
Posts.
Yeah. Or have it almost building, if it is a journey, you can, as you click through the various images, the image will build up, rather than throw everything at the user in one image.
Yeah.
and especially if you're doing it that way, then the copy and text will be more relevant and more important, rather than focusing purely on the image.
Another thing about design and getting that message across and making it nice and simple for the user, I guess, is using design to guide the user's eyes to the right area, the thing that you want them to pay the most attention to?
Yes, I mean, generally the rule is start top left, end bottom right, but it just depends. It's getting the balance of how, you have to work out how the user's eye is going to flow across the image or around the image, and it can be, you see quite often there was a real craze for circular infographics, but that only works if it's a process which will repeat.
Yeah.
And it can be quite confusing if you get back to square one.
Yeah, if it's actually linear. Yeah, using the right the right type of image is quite important. Yeah.
And it's well, generally a lot of the work I do tends to be internal work, so you can't you're doing it, it's not for external views, unfortunately, so you can't show it to people. But I know from a few experiences in the past, you show clients some of your portfolio and they'll say, oh, I really like that. Well, it doesn't quite fit the story you're trying to tell. Yeah, but I really like that, I want that.
Right. Yeah, so showing you what I can do, and the not it's not a catalogue.
Yeah. Yes, I'll have that one. Mix that one into that one.
Yeah, I've had similar experiences. But that's a really good point, talking about the internal, because internal marketing is something that's often overlooked, but actually, especially in larger, complex organizations, is really important, because everyone needs to understand their place in the organization and how that impacts the end user.
That's so true. It's so true, especially when there's big corporate change going through, if there's mergers, etc., or complete restructuring. And especially, well, so many companies are going through that at the moment, looking at what smart working is going to look like. They've got to explain so many things to staff. I mean, there may be, just think of some work I've been doing recently, the security protocols may be changing, new password policies, etc., and security policies. So you've got to explain that to staff quickly in a way that they can understand quickly and they'll actually pay attention to.
Yeah.
Without going into too much detail, without going into irrelevant detail that they don't need to do. It's just getting the facts across, as you know, the difficult bit.
Yes, it's well, I guess you and I are both used to doing it now, but yeah, it's especially when you first look at it, it can be a bit overwhelming. Whoa, where do I start? It's breaking that down, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you understand as well. It's looking at it from an objective point of view, and the understanding what the end user needs is quite a skill.
Yeah, and putting that information out to clients when they don't necessarily, they forget that maybe the people they're talking to don't already, they sort of assume a level of knowledge which isn't necessarily there. And it's putting that information out and, okay, let's take it a step back and then move it forward again. I think that's quite common, especially if the person that you're working with is more technical. It's easy for them to forget that the people they're speaking to aren't, like the acronyms, for example, that you were talking about, aren't used to that kind of, and don't know the acronyms off the top of their head. I've certainly worked for, I mean, I think engineers are one of the worst for it, for that one.
And because they understand, they think every part of the process and every little detail is important.
Yes.
Most of the rest of the organization don't need to know the majority of that.
Yes, yeah. So some information they're missing because they just assume that everyone already knows that. They don't need to bother about that. And then they go into too much detail about other stuff. And it's reminding them you are not the audience. And so take a step back and put yourself in the shoes of the audience. I think that's the truth for everyone, no matter how complex or simple your offering is. but I think that is something that technical guys often really struggle with. So it's but it's really, I'm sure you find the same thing, it's really rewarding working with these guys and getting something out there that is actually meets the needs of the end user, whether that's internal or external.
Yeah, indeed, that actually works. I mean, sometimes it can be as simple as explaining what so, you know, if something breaks, then who do you speak to? What's the process? And it's incredible, but it's also very useful for both points of view. It can be interesting to almost the CTO of an organization to realize that someone at the front desk can't do their job because there's a printer not working somewhere, or there's a connection not working somewhere, so that it all connects from both ends. And then they of course realize that their printer's not working and they need to find out how to do that, and the process that goes through, and that may not be as important because it may be something else that's broken, but you're just interested in what's not working for you.
Yes, that's the thing. They don't care about the detail, they just want to know how to get it fixed.
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So I guess you have to spend quite a lot of time going through, especially if you're dealing with an internal client, spend a lot of time working out what those processes are.
You do, yeah. It's actually, I was discussing with someone recently. It's amazing the things that you learn. You know, there's so much about IT that I now know that I had no interest in knowing. But even things like knowing how pain receptors connect to the brain. I've had to do some infographics on explaining that. And
wow, that's fascinating.
It's incredible some of the things that you actually learn in the process. Of course, it's only it's really just the high level that you need to usually get over in some points, but you do have to find out more about the detail so you can figure out what to leave in and what to emphasize.
Yeah, and sometimes that is a skill, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the fun bit.
Yeah.
As you know.
Yeah. So there are other think about people who might be watching this video. Are there things that I guess for everyone, because even if you've got a relatively simple offering, I think it's always best to simplify it for because people are bombarded with hundreds of messages, thousands probably messages a day. Is there general advice that people need to think about when it comes to design for their marketing?
Well, I mean, ideally it ties into their branding so that they've got a consistent message going through everything that they do, and that goes from the visual aspect to the wording. But it's really just, I suppose, them understanding what it is that their end user or their customer wants to know, without going, you know, without giving them too much extra detail that they don't need. It's just making sure they're getting a consistent message, and a consistent message that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think it often gets lost actually how important brand is, or what brand is. There's branding, which represents the brand, and I think a lot of people think, oh, that's not very important, especially for internal documents. That's not important, but actually research shows that it is really important, that they're more from external point of view, the more recognizable you are, the more you come to mind, the more. So if you're consistent in your tone of voice, that's the way you put your copy together in terms of your design, and have your logo, but other icons as well that always, you know, pop out, that's you. I mean, McDonald's famously even have a whistle that's, you know, immediately is that brand. You will come to mind when someone wants something that you sell, or you know, services you provide. And internally as well, it's really important that brand is really embedded, because if people understand what the brand is as a whole, which is what the you know, For those watching, it's about the core of the company and what they stand for, what they represent for the to the end user, to their customer. If everyone in the company understands that and really lives the brand, they actually have, I think it's twice the profit margin of other companies within their sector, which is huge. So it's, and I think it's easy to dismiss the idea of making sure internal communications are correctly branded as well, but actually it really helps embed that. And I don't know if you come across that pushback on that front.
No, you're spot on. That's exactly right. I mean, the branding goes from the visual image that the company portrays, but right through from the company top to bottom. The feel, you know, as you said, everybody needs to feel part of the company, and everybody's focused and going in the same direction, knows exactly what the company is about and all their values, etc. We've worked with some fascinating companies over the years. Some who have a company ethos and a company statement. There's one company in particular in the US we used to work with, which has their company ethos carved in a stone at the front door of the headquarters, which was interesting because they changed the branding to originally it was aligned left text. So they decided that everywhere this is used, it should be centered. Till it was pointed out they're going to have to recarve this stone or something. So, so the brand guidelines were then readjusted before they went live.
Right.
But little things like that, you know, to be consistent right across, well, that needs to be centered rather than the reins left. And it's like, that's not just a quick print job.
No, and you hear all these stories, don't you? Oh, they changed the logo ever so slightly, and it cost, you know, however many £1,000 it cost them. I could have done it cheaper. I could have, you know, whatever. But it's all it's not just the redesign itself, what actually requires skill. You know, graphic design isn't as easy as people think it is. But then there's also like, okay, all your letterheads need to be reprinted, all your signage needs to be redone. And all of a sudden the costs really mount up.
That's so true. It's when you see these figures about this rebrand costs so many millions. Well, the designers didn't get paid that. That's the cost it's done to repaint everything and re-sign everything. And it's incredible. I mean, there are some organizations who have two corporate brand guidelines. They've got the external customer facing branding, and they've also then got an internal communications branding which goes to staff, just to differentiate it slightly. And there's usually more fun involved in that. You know, just it's not quite as corporate. It can be quite fun.
Yeah, I can imagine. I had worked for a very large multinational organization for a while. And there were only certain, if there was so at the time, I think they've relaxed a little bit more now, but they were so stuffy. But yeah, there were certain document types that were for internal use that still had all those brand guidelines that we had to use. And but it was quite hard convincing people outside the marketing department sometimes that was really important.
Yeah. And then of course you get with mergers where one company buys another, and one of the company, which is possibly the incoming company, is seen, which is losing its branding, and employees may have been there for a long time and don't want to lose it. So you see years later, they're still using notepads branded with the previous company still, and they do as much as they possibly can to slow the corporate changeover.
Yes, that's always a tricky one, isn't it? When it's gradually changing that branding, because it's not, as well as, like you say, you've got all those employees who are quite emotional about and attached to the original brand. You've got all that brand equity as well. You know, the recognizability of that brand that you don't want to lose. So you've got to get it just right in terms of gradually moving to the new brand.
Yeah, well, I suppose it's good examples of employees really being embedded in the culture, because they're so linked to the previous company's branding and culture that they don't want to leave it behind. And
Yeah, it shows that the previous management did a good job.
yeah,
Yeah. Now the new management need to pull them in, which
but
is hard sometimes.
yeah, it's usually when you're doing internal communications, it's especially with lots of change and things like that. It's usually a good idea to target, though, rather than target the people that you think they're quite keen. You know, they're quite up for the whatever change is coming. It's quite often a good idea to target those that you think are going to be more resistant first, because if you can win them over, then they'll bring everyone else, rather than trying to pull everyone back.
That's a great tip for internal comms when you've got change management going on.
Yes.
Yeah, I've seen that as well. If you get the most stubborn people involved, especially if you get them involved from the ground up, pull them in on special projects and make them feel special as part of the.
Yes, definitely.
It makes a huge difference.
If you can get them involved, then it's a win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I guess it sounds like actually a lot of what you do, although the work you produce is ultimately design, I guess a lot of what you do goes beyond that. There's a lot of strategy involved.
There's a lot of work done with the stakeholders on the client side, and there's quite a lot of process going through to actually just figure out what message needs to come across in the graphics, etc. So yes, there's a quite a lot of workshop. Well, that's what it has been quite difficult not being in-room workshops, because that tends to work really well. You know, if you're standing around whiteboards, etc. Or I'd usually do quite a lot of scribing, so I'll take over the pens and the whiteboard, so that everyone else can just concentrate on discussion, and I'll stand at one side and draw everything, and hopefully pull out the important points.
Workshops like that are so hard to do, not online. It's so hard. I had my first face-to-face meeting with a client for a very long time the other week, and it made such a difference just being able to sit there. We were looking at processes for, in this case it was marketing automation, but it was so much easier if we were there with coloured pens and we were both able to go, oh yeah, and you've got to think about this, and it made such a huge difference being face to face. It's so hard doing that. There's so much you can do remotely, but I think that's one of the things that's so much easier face to face.
Yeah, especially when if you've got multiple people involved.
Yes.
Much easier. Yeah.
Oh,
much more productive.
I tried to run a workshop with 3 people last year, and we got it done in the end. This was about a marketing plan, but it's really, I mean, it's so hard with, even one-on-one, it's so much easier face-to-face, but yeah, multiple people, it makes it that much, because normally what I would do running a workshop, I'm sure very much how you described, get everyone in the room, writing stuff across, your flip charts or your whiteboards or whatever, and everyone shouts stuff at you, or you get them in corners with their ideas and bring it all together at the end. And that's just not something that works very well on, Zoom or Teams or whatever.
And there's something about the immediacy of Postit notes, where people can Sharpies and Postit notes, and then you can move them around and plan things out that way. It makes such a difference. I mean, there's great tools like Miro, which you can connect into Zoom, and you can emulate that in a bit of a way, but it's nothing quite like having a pen and paper and or a pen and a wall.
There's something very tactile about it, isn't there, when you're doing that sort of thing?
Yeah,
it really helps. Yeah. I'm glad it's not just me that struggles with that kind of thing.
No, I think the last big workshop I was involved with were, I think it was a week before lockdown last year, so it'd been beginning of March last year down in Birmingham, and that seems so long ago now.
I know. And at the same time, it seems, at the same time, I don't know about you, but I feel like the last couple of years also just, I'm not quite sure where they've gone. It seems so long ago, and yet no time has passed at the same time.
It's crazy. It just, the last year has just disappeared.
Yeah, it's very strange time, and I can't wait for things to get back to even more normal. So yeah, and I think even if people don't really have the budget to go to, you know, someone like me or someone like you, I think it's a good point as well, that when they think about these processes, thinking about how to communicate things, sitting down and going through the process, and everything involved and what the objectives are, that's a really important thing to do before we actually try and design something, or put an advert out there, or put a blog together or whatever.
Yeah, and even bringing in people that wouldn't normally be involved, just to get their take, because it could be people outside their normal sphere that they need to get the information across to.
Yes. Oh, that's absolutely key. That is really key. There's so many for brand workshops, for example, I like to try and get not just the manager of the company, the directors. I like to get in everyone's point of view, because you miss things, like the sales guys who talk to the customers on a day-to-day basis. They'll pick up on things that the managing director has no idea of. Customer service is the same, and if you can get interview clients as part of the process as well, that's the end user, that's even better.
Yeah,
because you pick up on so many things.
Yeah, and even front desk. I mean, they're the ones that see everyone coming into a building. Remember those days of going into a building? So they've got a great insight as well. Into staff and customers and suppliers. So they get to see the whole sphere that the company has to deal with.
Yeah, that brings to mind. I was doing a similar thing. I was doing a piece of research. A company I was working at, it was aggregates industry, and from an engineering point of view, they're trying to market things, how reliable their products were, and how these are the best products from that point of view. But actually talking to the sales guys, or one particular sales guy in particular, picked up on the fact that they just don't have time. They don't care how reliable it is. They're just too busy running around. They don't. So of course, if something's more reliable, though, actually they are spending less time on it. It's just it's a step beyond. And when you're trying to grab someone's attention, it's getting that right twist on it. So we, funnily enough, we had an internal graphic designer, and he put a bunch of infographics together all about how these products save you man hours. And that was a completely different message, really easy to get across, actually, in a graphical way, that got the right attention. So it's like you said, it's really important to bring all those people in, to make sure that you are on the right track and you are talking about the right information, and spinning it in the right way.
Yeah, spinning it in the right way is a big thing. We did a project for a client, again at my previous company, and they were having trouble getting remote staff to connect to the system to make sure all their files were synchronized. So they wanted a way to sort of encourage them to do that. They tried for quite a long time. So we actually gamified it. We produced a Z card, a little fold out credit cards. So we had an infographic on one side saying this is exactly how the process works, and it's really simple, and all the detail, all the contact numbers, etc. But we actually put a unique number on the back of each card, and they said, right, each month we'll have a prize draw. for something. So it may be an iPad one month, lunch with the head of sales the next month, and the staff then held on to these things and actually referred back to them, and they got people onto the system very, very quickly after spending a couple of years of just failing miserably and almost giving up. But it's
That's
just
genius.
that twist on things to just encourage people.
Yeah, it's psychology plays a huge part in successful marketing and, you know, design.
Yeah,
It's
it does. Yeah,
incredible.
just getting the tone of voice right. I
Mm,
mean, you'll know that from your experience, but you're getting the tone of voice right for the end customer, end market is makes a massive difference to how successful it is.
yeah, yeah, absolutely huge. Yeah, I feel like I need to spend a lot more time studying more psychology to learn even more, because, you know, more and more we're finding out more and more about like nudge theory, and which must be huge for internal communications when you need people to be behaving a certain way and
Yeah.
following certain processes.
Yes, and exactly, and especially the nudge theory, that getting them to behave, and also then subconsciously getting them to encourage others to behave the same way, and everyone pushing each other on, rather than aiming at an individual. You're trying to build up a team mentality, and if it works, it's really successful.
Yeah. So I think I think some in some organizations more than others don't appreciate marketing, or even worse, design. I know designers have been called the colouring in department. So hopefully this is getting across that actually it's a little bit more scientific than that.
It is, yeah. It's even been described that a few times as out at client meetings, and says, "Oh, he's in charge of colouring in."
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's really important to get across. I think one of the things that's great about this interview is getting across just how much more there is to it than just, you know, put some stuff together on Photoshop or InDesign or whatever. There's a lot more involved before you even start on the artwork.
Yeah, there's a lot of thought and processes first. I think, I mean, I'm old school, so I start with pencil and pen on a pad or iPad, but rather than jump into the software like Adobe Illustrator, InDesign, etc., I think you can work through so many ideas more quickly with a pen and paper than you can sitting in front of a computer. Plus, it gets you away from the screen for periods, rather than just spending all day, as in the last year and a half or so, the amount of time people have spent just staring at Zoom.
Oh gosh, yes.
Any excuse to jump away from a screen must be good.
Absolutely. I had a couple of weeks off recently, and it made a huge, I think my eyes were suffering. They felt a lot better afterwards, and I can see further. I'm sure I can.
I think is that true? We managed to get away for 2 weeks this summer, and I think although the second week I was getting some work done, but I think the thing I noticed most was that it's the relief of just being away from just staring at your screen.
Yeah.
I think that was much more than actually not working all day every day.
Yeah, I think that's huge, and I think you're more productive as well if you're doing work in different. Just the fact that you're doing things in different ways, you end up being, in a way, a change is almost as good as a break sometimes. So just doing things in different mediums, which is very similar to from the end user's point of view as well. If you do things in different mediums, so you've got your digital online stuff, you've got stuff in print, you know, these things sink in better then. And I think it's similar producing work as well, using different mediums. And yeah, I use pen and paper a lot, and I'm sure it really helps.
Oh, it does, definitely. It's that connection from the brain and the hand. You don't quite get that with a mouse. It's definitely makes a difference.
Huge difference, yeah. And is there anything else that we haven't covered that you really think is important to get across to people when it comes to making messages as simple as possible through?
Most things that I can think of off the top of my head.
We've covered a lot, to be fair. I just thought I'd make sure we've covered everything. Excellent. Yes, I think there's a lot of great information in that. Thank you very much.
That's good.
And
helpful.
Yeah, before we go, do you have anything to plug? Anything that you want people to know?
Not really. That's just when I'm working, I just like to work on it's. There's so many people now talking and advising, well, not just creatives, but anyone on the way you should market your business nowadays is to niche down and really specialize and focus. And I just like doing the complete opposite. I just like doing so many different things, and we've been over the years been so guilty of saying yes to something and then thinking, right, how are we going to do that? Rather than say, yeah, that's easy, we can do this. It's so much more fun if you've then got to go and work out how you're going to do something and stretch yourself a bit.
So if you've got something that's really complicated, really hard,
speak to Samantha first, and then I'll colour it in.
Right, okay, well, I will share all your links anyway when I put this out. Yeah, and thank you very much, and thank you everyone for watching.
You're welcome. Thank you.